Hello and welcome to another video on the best games of a letter, Arcade Edition. And this is for the letter I. Yes, in this video series I imagine, what if I could only choose 5 games per letter per system and discard all others? What would I choose? So this means I'm coming not from the point of view of which games are most important to video gaming history, or even which games are most beloved, but instead, for me, what games do I personally enjoy to play above all else? Now my choices here may surprise you, but this video series is a bit of fun and really a chance to rekindle some old memories and maybe discover some new games along the way. Basically to help give people suggestions on what games to try the next time they're looking through their retro gaming lists, deciding what to play. Okay, as I mentioned, this is for the arcades and the letter I. So without further ado, let us begin. Okay, for my 5th choice I've chosen In the Hunt, which is an IREM game released in 1993. This is a submarine blaster and therefore has a slower pace of gameplay, but it's mixed in with great chunky colourful graphics. In fact, actually, the game is made by the designer Akio, who of course would go on to design the Metal Slug games. And once you know that little nugget of fact, you begin to see some real parallels in the art style between this and the other games, and along with certain gameplay design elements as well. So what we have here is a pretty solid shooter really, with the idea of having to shoot the enemies underwater in front of you, or to take the risk and come to the surface and press the second fire button to fire torpedoes to take out the flying craft above. Now, described by many as Metal Slug in an aquarium, what we're left here is a pretty fun shooter, although perhaps not doing anything particularly inspired as you attack all the 6 levels on offer. And I've got to be honest, I mean, on a stronger letter this probably wouldn't have made the cut, but I do have a lot of love for this game and played it for years on the very good Saturn port back in the day. Now, as I mentioned, the Sega Saturn port is very good, but there's also a PlayStation 1 port which is also pretty solid really, and nowadays you can actually buy the IREM Arcade Hits collection by .mu on the PC, and this includes all of the main hitters for the IREM back catalogue, including all the R-Type games. And along with this, In the Hunt has also appeared on the PS4 and Switch as well, so there's plenty of opportunities to give this game a go. Okay, that brings me on to my 4th choice, and I've gone here for the revered shooter Ikaruga, which is by Treasure and released in 2001. Now this is undeniably a beautiful looking shooter with stunning graphics and fun shooting action. Now the central premise or gimmick here really for this shooter is that you have 2 polarities to your craft, where you can switch between black and white. Now depending on which polarity you choose means that the bullets of the same colour hitting you can be absorbed. So if you're black and there's black bullets, it will actually increase your energy, but the bullets of the opposite colour to your craft, say the white bullets, means that you'll be damaged and it will kill you. And also alongside that, the polarity of your ship, if it's opposite to the enemy ship, will mean that your bullets will be twice as powerful against that craft of the opposite colour. Now if I'm honest, I do enjoy the game, and I know that it's so well revered by so many people, with people often citing this as the best shooter of all time. Now I'm going to be honest here, for me personally it's not one of my favourite shooters. It's one that I enjoy and play to some extent, but it's certainly by no means one of my favourites. And I think the whole reason is that for me personally, I find the polarity switching a right pain, meaning I have to think too much and I never quite fall into that zone because I'm too worried about which polarity to be. And for me, being in that gameplay zone is what I play shooters like this for, so I don't really enjoy this quite as much. It's also worthy to note that this game is punishingly hard and brutal, so it's really only for those that really like a challenge and, you know, to stand up and apply here. Still, as I say, it is a solid shooter, and it's made by the team behind such gems as Gunstar Hero, Alien Soldiers, and of course the spiritual prequel to this game, Radiant Silvergun, which actually I'm more of a fan of personally, but that's another rock hard shooter. Back in the day, this saw great home port on the Dreamcast, although that's very pricey to buy today. Better way into buying the game is probably on the GameCube. It's a great port. It came out a little bit later. That's a great way of playing it because of course you can play that on your Wii or GameCube console, or indeed on the Dolphin emulator. Now later on there was the Xbox 360 Arcade Shop digital only release, which was another great way of playing it, and today you can pick it up on Steam at an incredibly cheap price of $6.99, but also on the PS4 and Nintendo Switch. So there's plenty of ways of giving this game a go. Now the version I'm showing here is the GameCube port to show you what it's like, and it really is arcade perfect, as you can see here. Right, okay, let's go on to my third choice, and here I've chosen the 1989 release title, Iron Man Ivan Stewart's Super Off-Road. Now this is an off-road super sprint style overhead racer, basically showing you the whole track on one screen. There's so much fun here playing through it. Now it's made by the publisher and developer Leyland, probably someone you don't know, but you probably know their initial name, which was Cinematronics Incorporated. Yes, so this is the same publishing house behind Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Now if you're wondering who is Ivan Iron Man Stewart put on the title, well, he's basically an off-road racing legend who throughout the 70s just pretty much won every award going for off-road. But back to the game itself here, it's a really excellent game, having up to 3 people crammed around the cabinet, racing around in jeeps in cool off-road tracks to become first place. And to give you the edge, you have a limited number of nitros that you can use at any time to speed you past the other racers. And this is why I love this game. The off-road tracks here really make a difference, with the track hills and water noticeably slowing your vehicles down if you go across them, meaning that you have to really think how you're going to negotiate the tracks or use the shortcuts to give you that edge over the opponents. At the end of the race, depending on how on your position or any loot that you picked up during the race, it means you get to spend cash on truck upgrades to improve your vehicle's performance or buy nitros. It all plays so well, especially in multiplayer, where you're offered a far better challenge than the computer control vehicles. And getting 3 people on the arcade cabinet with the wheels, or playing it perhaps with a multi-tap on the snares, or however you come across it, is just a great way to enjoy this game. It really elevates it to another level. Now in addition to this game, the same year they added on an add-on pack called a track pack for this game, and this gives you I think about 12 more tracks and allows you to race in dune buggies as well as like trucks, and it's a really great fun set of courses here and adds to the fun. And I wish more arcade games back in the day did these sort of add-on packs. I think it's a lovely touch. Now thankfully this game did see home ports everywhere, but the SNES, the Amiga and the Atari ST are for me the particular highlights that really caught and captured that original game, being for the most part arcade perfect. Now later on the Xbox, PS2 and GameCube, there was the Midway Arcade Treasure Volume 3 compilation. Now as you probably heard me in the last video singing this praises, this is a brilliant compilation, particularly if you love your arcade racers. And for this collection it has both off-road racing and the track pack add-on for you to enjoy here. The game as well appeared on the Midway Arcade Origins collection on the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. Now MAME does emulate it, but to be honest I find I can never get the controls right, and so actually what I tend to do, and what I'm showing you here, is the brilliant Midway Arcade Treasure Volume 3. I'm using the GameCube version to show you, but this, as you can see, captures the arcade original perfectly, and it's a great way to play it. Fortunately, yes, you guessed it, Arcade Club also has a 3-player cabinet in Bury in the UK, so this is so much fun for you and your mates to cram around and play the game as it was meant to be played. Right, now we come to my number 2 choice, and I've gone for the arcade racing series that has never really made it across to the West for some bizarre reason, and that series is called Initial D. And the game that I've chosen specifically in that series is Initial D Arcade Stage 8 Infinity, which was released by Sega in 2014. Now the game is based on a manga and anime about illegal street racing, which was an anime around about 1995, and it has you do illegal racing throughout the mountainous roads of Japan in the countryside. And the Sega series captures that anime show perfectly with some great one-on-one racing action along exciting roads. Now playing this game is a wonderful experience with the beautiful mountainous roads of the gorgeous Japanese scenery and countryside. It really gives you a sense of sightseeing along with all the exciting driving into the corners and cutting up your opponents to finally pass your rival. It's got lovely touches as well, such as the bucket of water, which is a lo-fi symbol of a bonus that you'll lose if you crash too much. And I think that's such a genius way of depicting this. It really encourages you not to crash or jostle far more than if you perhaps had just a typical damage symbol to your car. But that's really what the whole game's about. It's the versus nature that works so brilliantly, with every corner being an exciting strategic battle as you work out how to pass the rival car, of which as you're going through, the handling is amazing as only Sega can do it, all set to the wonderful, quite frankly batty J-pop style tunes running in the background, which are very similar to the anime original. Then at the end of the stage you get your winnings to allow more upgrades to your car and improve still further. Now there's been many games in this series over the years, but of all of them I've decided to choose this one, which is the 10th in the arcade series and the last but one in that series, as I feel it's the pinnacle in both looks and gameplay department. It really showcases the best elements of this series. Now finding and playing this game today is tough, I guess, because it never really saw a Western release and it never got a home port on this version, although some of the earlier titles did see Japanese only ports which you can import over for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1 through to 3 for all the different iterations. Thankfully though, Technoparrot does do this particular arcade series perfectly and includes the Initial D 8 Infinity as well. Alternatively, yes, you guessed it, Arcade Club in Bury in the UK also has this machine as well, and it's a gorgeous 2-player sit-down cabinet of this game, meaning that you can play it as it was intended, with a friend racing each other as a multiplayer experience, and it's just so much fun. Such a great way to play it. Right, now we come to my number one choice for the letter I in the arcades, and I've chosen here the Sega 1995 racer Indy 500, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now this is made by the AM1 division of Sega, and for all intents and purposes, for me at least, it's a continuation to Daytona, replacing NASCAR cars with IndyCar racing instead. But unlike that original Model 2 board, this is on the Model 2B board, so you've got a lot more oomph and power under the hood, making this all run blisteringly fast as you twist in and out of all the other racers, making your way across 3 tracks. Now this is pure Sega arcade racing perfection here, with the Sega blue skies across 3 well-designed tracks. Now we have the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the only bit that's licensed in this game, which is of course the famous oval track of the IndyCar racing. But much better, I think, are the other 2 tracks, which are fantasy based. There's the Highland Raceway. This is a fun track set in the rock valleys, travelling under bridges and coming up to corners into a tunnel of bizarre milk bottle statues. And the third track is equally great as well, being Bayside Street, and this is a gorgeous seaside track with great city skyscrapers and reminds you a lot of Monaco. Now this game, I have to confess, is a relatively new discovery for me. This was an arcade game that had passed me by for the longest time, and I'd only suggested it by a fellow host on the RGDS podcast that I do, where he suggested it as one of the titles on one of our topics, and I'm so glad he did, because since that time I've been playing this complete hidden gem, to me at least, non-stop. As I mentioned, this is a perfect complement to Daytona USA. I mean, sure, the music is not quite as iconic, but still, this is Sega rock at some of its best, especially with the Highland track, which I think is epic, quite frankly. Now, sadly, this amazing gem has never seen a home port, or even on an arcade compilation. And boy, do Sega need to do a proper arcade compilation pack of their games. A whole series would make me the happiest man alive. Now, outside of the brilliant Sega Model 2 emulator, which you're seeing here, which does a great job emulating this game, as you can see, the only other place that you can try this is, I've occasionally seen it once at a retro event in the UK, but either that or you've just got to be lucky enough to just come across it out in the wild. But if you do, definitely give this game a go. So there you go, they were my top 5 games for the letter I. Of course, there's always a few big hitters which didn't make my list, and a few honourable mentions that I think deserve to be given at least a mention. So the first big hitter, of course, that isn't on my list, that I suspect probably makes a lot of other people's lists, is Akari Warriors. Now, this was released in 1986, and it was SNK's answer to Commando. Now, for me, I totally get the love for this game, and I know how much it's revered, but for the most part, I've never really enjoyed the Commando-like run and guns, if I'm honest. It's only when you start getting into the realms of like Mercs and later ones that I tend to give them any time. And this is no different. It's another game that I don't really get on with, and so I've always given it a wide berth, both in the arcades and the countless home ports. My only other big game mention is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which was released in Atari in 1985. Now, I suppose this does a good job giving a sense of the Indiana Jones movie by recreating 3 scenes from it. Now, firstly, you go through saving caged kids and taking out the snakes and baddies as you make your way up the ladders to the mine. Then in the next section, you're on a minecart riding down, and you must whip out at your enemies to guide the minecart to the end of the track. Now, finally, you're in the temple, and here you must go to the opening where there's an opening and closing floor and pick up the Sankara stone like in the movie, and then take the stone to one of the 4 doors that open. And that's it really. And you know, outside of it being an indie game, to be honest, for me, I think it's a pretty naff arcade game, I'm sorry to say. It's one that I've never really gelled with, even on the Spectrum, which I used to have. Right, okay, that was the big hitters, but I also have a few honourable mentions as well that are lesser known titles, but I think deserve to be shouted out. And first we have the 1989 Taito Q-em-up called Insector X. Now in the game you play a bee and you blast all the other creatures in this simple twee bug blaster. Now the game's not going to win any awards, it's pretty bog standard really, but it's still a lot of fun. Now this is an interesting one, iRobot, released in 1984 by Atari. Now it's made by David Thurer, yes, the man who did Tempest and Missile Command, and this is a real weird little oddity involving running around 3D platforms and painting them, and then going into some quite impressive 3D shooting sections. Now it is a technical achievement what's going on here in 1984, and it's a genuinely an interesting title, well ahead of its time, but you do get the feeling that ambition and technical wizardry outstrips the actual gameplay ability of the game, which is for me a little bit lacking. It's definitely missing some of the excitement of some of the other David Thurer games. Now another weird one worthy of mention is the Williams 1984 game Inferno. Now this is like a weird love child between Crystal Castles and Robotron, having you run around the pits of hells blasting all the demons. It's a strange, bizarre, very, very strange little game. And sadly, it's just that little bit clunky and weird to be considered a classic. I like weird, but it's the clunkiness that I have the problem with. I don't ever seem to gel with the game. And then finally, we have the shooter Ibara Kuru. Now I'm showing the Black Label version of the game, which was released a year later than the original in 2006, and it's another cave shooter. This is a solid shooter produced by Tsuneki Akida, you know, the guy who did many of my favourite shooters such as Dudonpachi and Mushiyama and Ketsu and things like that. But this feels distinctly different, and it's not not surprising. Why? You see, although it's produced by Tsuneki Ikeda, it's actually developed and designed by Shinobu Yagawa. Now he is of Raising fame, who of course did the Battle Gariga games, and that's essentially what he was asked when Raising actually went to the wall. Sadly, Shinobu was offered across to work for Cave, and he was given the task, if you wanted, to create a Battle Gariga style game for Cave, and this is what he produced. So consequently, one of the criticisms that I often see for the game of it not feeling like a Cave or Akeda game, it's hardly surprising really. Now I won't get involved with the convoluted plot. Basically there's 5 Rose Guardian ladies that you have to take on before the final boss, but all you need to know is it's fast, it's pretty, and it's mega tough shooter. But it's a lot of fun, and although I don't think it's one of Cave's or Raising's best, it's definitely worth tracking down and giving a go. Right, okay, that was my top 5 games for the letter I. Hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to hear your own suggestions, and I've been loving the suggestions coming through for the other letters. So tell me what you would personally choose for this letter. I would love to know. Right, okay, look out for my next video covering the letter J, and it's going to be a tough one to decide against because it's definitely a tough letter to pick through. So until next time, keep it retro.